Hey there, it's Silver, and we've got a very interesting game in early access today. This is a Hooded Horse published game, and I feel like these guys have really been killing it recently. They've kind of found their niche of interesting indies, often with strategic and management elements, and carved their way into the scene with some pretty serious bangers. I really enjoy when smaller publishers have a theme, like a set of styles they go for. It often leads to some passionate devs holding on to their creative freedom to make something how they want to. In this case, this is an Autobattler with some very neat elements that bring it kinda within the realm of something like Loop Hero, which is in itself quite a cool and unique game. The main idea here is that each run is a self-contained adventure where you explore an area and gather gear and upgrades in time to face the boss. Then everything will get a bit harder and you'll try again. If you succeed at 3 boss rounds, then you'll win the run. Even if it's currently in its early access state, it has a nice variety of things to discover already. I enjoy games where the formula is stripped down to a simple but strategic version of itself, where the idea of an RPG adventure is distilled into a run where you start at nothing and wind up endgame level strong if you can survive that long. The concept of gathering an entire set of powerful gear to make some sort of hopefully coherent build being compressed down to an easily repeatable run that's meant to test your skills at making something work with what you find is a fun bit of design that seems to be becoming more popular as people explore the roguelite genre. From an art design perspective, we've got a very simple look that foregoes fancy animations and particle effects and stuff to instead call up a pretty classic looking 8-bit style. Everything from the items to the enemies uses what I would call an 8-bit plus style, by which I mean it's clearly inspired by 8-bit stuff of the past, but it's also much sharper, and the color palette seems to be more varied as well. This is a very dark game by design. The background of the whole game itself is black, as is the background of all windows and menus, so it gives this effect of bright and sharp icons and sprites floating over this inky void, which leads the game to a kind of foreboding atmosphere. The battle screens look particularly nice due to the character and enemy sprites. They're larger and higher detail than what a typical 8-bit sprite would look like, but they still look clearly inspired by that era. I think the boss sprites are my favorite part of the visuals. They're large and sort of creepy looking, breaking the rules of a more traditional retro sprite of this type. The fact they deliberately break those rules works in their favor, as it makes them look kinda otherworldly and extra threatening because they don't quite belong with the other sprites. They're also really good at using negative space to add detail, using the ever-present black shapes to imply some more layers to the sprites that don't actually have to be there for you to see them. The environments look good, with 2 different ones currently in early access, and they manage a nice atmosphere despite being visually simplistic. Each of the 2 areas feel completely different, and considering you're going to be spending an entire run in one biome, it helps that they be pretty engrossing. The forest is an almost fairy tale level dark forest with wolves lurking in the trees and a line of sight that can be limited by the dense patches of forest. But there are nice paths winding through that you can use, and streams crisscrossing bridges, making it easy to navigate. The swamp, though, feels more hostile. Jagged paths and acid water combine with the fact that it's made up of several islands that can only be navigated by ferry to create a more nasty and foreboding place. It's always good to have your adventure be atmospheric, but it is harder to do that in a game with a top-down perspective and simplistic art style. However, I think they pull it off just fine by quality of aesthetics. The music is worth mentioning too. Fittingly, it's going for an 8-bit chiptune sound, but it has significantly more fidelity than something like an NES game would, as well as not actually sounding bit-crushed, but instead quite clear. It sounds rather dark, like an adventure through a hostile world that wants you to fail, and communicates a certain building tension as you go. The battle music reminds me of some classic JRPGs, the boss music especially. I think that if the goal was to craft a soundtrack that completed the aesthetic when combined with the art, it certainly does succeed at that. Some of the music, mostly the later loop and boss tracks, reminds me of some melodic metal, kind of, without being overtly metal sounding-ish. It's nicely varied and doesn't tend to rest on one specific sound for too long during the average run. Overall, the audiovisual presentation is strong here, I feel. Some people see 8-bit art and feel that it's so simplistic it probably doesn't take much effort to create. I found that it actually does take a good amount of effort because a style like that can be very limiting and representational, causing you to need to try harder to fit as much variety and detail in it as you can for all these small symbols and sprites that you have to work with. The need to make things immediately identifiable while also keeping to a small size is a struggle that any sprite-based style is going to give you, but an 8-bit style is going to make it even more difficult. Combining this art with this music makes a really nice cohesive aesthetic, and it shows the developers had a detailed idea of what this game was going to look and sound like from the start. The gameplay loop we've got here is centered entirely around time management, while building power efficiently in order to survive. When you start a run, you'll choose from one of 2 biomes currently available, although at first you'll only have the forest. You'll unlock the swamp after completing the forest for the first time. They've also said they want to include at least 1 more biome by the time the game goes 1.0. Each biome has a completely different set of event types, loot, and bosses, making you come up with completely different strategies for each place. As soon as you start, you'll be next to a home tile in a randomly generated zone equipped with nothing but a wooden stick. Obviously, you'd like to change that as soon as possible, so you pick a direction and start exploring. You'll notice a track at the top of the screen split into 3 days and nights with a red notch at the end. Every few steps you take, another notch drops away and you progress along the track. Once you reach the end, you'll have to face the boss. So it's all about gathering power in the time you have left before that happens. While walking around, you'll come across all kinds of different symbols that you'll come to learn what they all mean pretty quickly. The game has a heavy use of symbols and very few words. All of your stats, for instance, are represented by symbols that you'll see on your character and also on gear you find. Health, attack, armor, and speed are the stats you'll want to build, and there are plenty more special effects that can be applied as you go. The orange symbols on the map are points of interest you'll want to visit during your adventure. The most obvious ones you'll want to find are treasure chests. These give you a choice between 3 different items of varying rarities, of which you can take 1. Very rarely, you'll come across a golden chest. These contain golden versions of that area's items, which are twice as strong as their mundane counterparts. Vastly rarely, you may also find a diamond chest, which contains diamond items that are twice as powerful as golden ones. You have a weapon slot and 4 item slots to start with, which means you're very limited in how your build can work, as you've got to fit all of it within those slots. This is one big reason that the golden and diamond items are so valuable. They contain multiple slots worth of power, but only take 1. Once you're full, you can always choose to replace something with a new item you find, but items discarded like this cannot be gotten back. There are also other uses of items you may want to consider as well. Opening lots of chests to fine-tune what you have is extremely important, and is the main way you're going to be getting stronger during the run. You can also come across many other types of spaces that are all more situational. The fairy will change any item you choose into another random item of that same rarity. The golem allows you to put 2 of the same item into it and turns them into their golden counterpart, and will also allow you to do the same for a diamond version. Watchtowers will zoom the map out a bit and reveal the area around you, and the fortune teller's orb will let you choose a specific space type and show you where the nearest one is. There are also merchants, which are always nice to find. They'll have 6 different items for sale, most of them for 5 gold, although one of them will usually be discounted to 3. There'll also be 1 higher rarity item on display that costs 10 gold. Sometimes you can also find wealthy merchants, which are extra good, because their whole inventory will consist of only higher rarity items, except they cost 5 gold for them. So, how do you make gold? This is where the enemies come in. The map will have loads of red enemy spaces you can encounter, each having their own stats and passives that you can learn by fighting them. Although holding shift on the map will let you hover the cursor over things to describe them, including giving you a full preview of what each enemy type does. After you have a few pieces of gear, you can start fighting enemies. Each defeated one gives you precisely 1 gold. No matter the enemy type, they always drop exactly 1. There is no experience or anything in this game, or item drops, so the main purpose to fighting enemies is to get gold, as well as to test the effectiveness of your current build. Just watch out for taking damage, as health loss is persistent, and you generally don't want to go into the big boss fight injured. Combat is completely automatic. Each side will take turns whacking each other dependent on their speed stats. Each smack will take your attack and subtract it from their HP, unless they have armor, which is damaged first. There are all kinds of automatic effects you can have go off depending on what you found, but a few examples are exposed effects, which do something when you lose all of your armor, and wounded effects, which trigger when you're at half HP. Buffs and debuffs are extremely powerful, and many builds exist specifically to maximize certain ones with redundant triggers and powerful stacking weapons. During the day, you have to poke enemies yourself to encounter them, but at night they'll actually chase you if you get too close. Also at night, your field of vision will get a lot smaller, and spaces on the map that aren't in your direct line of sight will become question marks. Nights are shorter than days by a bit, but they also activate these campfire nodes. During the day, they do nothing, but at night you can choose to rest at them. This will fast forward you to the first notch of the next day, and also heal you for 10 HP. If you happen to be near your house at the start of the map, you can also rest there at night, which does the same thing, but it heals you for full instead. After spending 3 days exploring and equipping yourself, at the end of the last night, the boss will appear, and you'll be thrown into combat with them immediately. You can't avoid them. Bosses are naturally harder than other enemies, but also often have a specific passive gimmick or weird stat line that you gotta find ways to exploit. You can examine the upcoming boss like you can other enemies in order to have an idea of what to expect when it shows up. If you manage to beat the boss, you'll get some gold and get plopped down right where you were, and the next 3-day cycle will start. However, all enemies will level up to 2, making them all stronger in different ways, but to compensate, you'll also get 2 more item slots to use. If you beat the second boss, the same thing will happen, and enemies will become level 3, and you'll have the maximum 8 item slots to use. Beating the third boss wins you the run. The bosses you face are somewhat random, but they also have levels. The first boss on the track will always be a tier 1 boss, then it'll switch to the pool of tier 2 bosses for the second loop, and so on. Each of the 3 tiers has several possible bosses that could spawn, and each of the 2 biomes has completely separate boss pools with no overlap. This is to make you scramble for different kinds of builds depending on what you're going to be facing, and when you combine that with the random gear you'll find, there isn't really a best build that you can always automatically make and win everything with every time. When you get to the swamp, you'll realize how much effort went into making the biomes feel very different. Not a single boss, enemy, or piece of loot is shared between them. Many of the nodes on the map are new too, and there are even new mechanics to look out for, such as Riptide and Poison. This is an excellent idea, making each area feel so totally different that it completely reinvigorates the strategies and builds you can come up with. When each place is such a detailed set of different ideas, it also makes the prospect of another one being added extra exciting. Some new ideas in the swamp are the Poison status, which ticks at the start of a turn but doesn't bypass armor, or the Riptide status that can be built every time a stack expires. It does 5 burst damage, which is pretty high. You'll also come across Acid, which eats away at armor, and the new Tome item type. These are magic books that have a countdown and then do something powerful, and they have a new node on the map to find them, kind of like the jewelry boxes from the forest. There are also weapon piles, which contain entirely weapons, of course, and lush chests, which have a selection of 4 items instead of 3, and can also be gold and diamond, I think. The bosses in the swamp are harder than those in the forest, in my opinion, and often have some really nasty gimmicks to overcome. Navigating the swamp is also different. It consists of islands that predominantly contain one node type. When you find the ferry node, you can travel to another island that will also have its own node types. This means your time management is stressed more on this map, due to wanting to spread to many different places for a variety of nodes. Both areas offer a solid, condensed RPG experience, but the complexity in build types changes quite a bit between them. There are also some mainstays that remain between both areas, like anvils, which will let you enchant your current weapon with a special edge type, or change edge types for 10 gold. Although both biomes do have different sets of edges to find. There are also blade oils you can come across, which add passive stats to weapons. A good weapon you want to keep will be useful for your build and also contain both of these upgrades to specialize it more. So, as you can imagine, the different stat types combined with all the different status effects and triggerable item conditions all combine to make this game a very build-rich environment. This many modular moving parts that can be put together in this many ways makes for a pretty great amount of run variance, and there's somewhere a bit over 350 items to find. There are also challenges, which you'll be completing on deaths and successes. These unlock new items for the pool. You'll eventually unlock the ability to banish items during a run, and something I like is that as you unlock more items, the number of banishes you get will automatically rise as well. There's a whole grid of challenges for you to look at, one for each biome. Some challenges will be pretty simple to get as time goes on. Others, like the boss challenges, are significantly more difficult. I got one to beat an end boss without sleeping once for an entire run, as an example. Another layer are the item sets. These are somewhat esoteric, as the game doesn't tell you anything about them, but each biome has several sets. When you have a specific combination of items in your inventory all at once, a set will trigger and give you a powerful extra effect on top of what the items are doing, usually a huge boost of stats or an even stronger passive bonus. For instance, you'll find that some powerful items come with negative stats as a cost for their power. However, if you have both the swamp items Holy Shield and Holy Tome at once, you'll trigger the Holy Crucifix set, which will completely negate all negative stats you get. All of this does highlight a potential problem though. With this many moving parts, it's easy to start thinking the game may rely too heavily on RNG. All these items and sets, all these enemy types and bosses, it all paints a pretty intricate picture of how the mechanics are meant to work. However, while playing, you are still at the mercy of RNG. The banishes help, but many players report that there aren't enough of them at the moment, and other than that one mechanic, there's not really any other major way to mitigate the power of randomness during a run. You could get mega lucky and find 3 diamond chests in a row first thing and be stacked instantly. You could also not find a good weapon until the day before the final boss. I think the game does try to put a damper on the concept of randomly getting screwed in a way you had no control over by focusing on variant ways to get stronger. So it's clear the devs do know of this problem that some roguelites have, but I also think that without more player controllable ways to fight against RNG, a game with this many mechanics and intricate passive stacking and stuff is going to face a tough reality that the amount of randomness the player has to wade through is sometimes just going to push against them so hard it carries them away. So this is a game that is full of fun content and generally quite easy to recommend, but you'll also have to be aware that the level of RNG on display can sometimes take control from you and make you just want to restart instead. The game has already had 10 patches for things like balance and randomness as well as bug fixing, so you can easily see that the devs are knowledgeable of what exactly they want their game to be and are realizing it over the time in its early access campaign. I think the vibe here is that it's a really interesting and solid game with a mechanically varied structure, but the ways in which it allows the player to mitigate randomness still aren't fully realized just yet. They've also mentioned that the price probably won't be going up when the game hits 1.0, which I feel is pretty generous. If it looks interesting at all to you, I'd really recommend trying it, even if the randomness sometimes gets in the way because the loop is enjoyable enough to be along for the ride. For $20, there's more than enough here to justify being a part of your library if you're a Roguelite fan. I'll put the link to the Steam page in the description first thing, so if you're interested, you can give it a look. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.